Hey y'all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton, here with Brandon. There is no news this week. Nothing from Bushy Road about Springfest, or new English release dates, or stream dates, or tournaments, or anything. So, instead of sitting here and staring at our microphones for a few minutes, Brandon and I have decided that, because it's Valentine's Day, at least when we're recording this, that we're just going to talk about our favorite waifu decks for a few minutes. Because, again, there is nothing else going on. Rumble has ended. The long-form analyses of Rumble have been more or less completed. So we're just going to talk about some decks that we've built, about characters that we like. These decks follow the kind of traditional waifu deck rules of all but 4 cards must feature that character. And they are not necessarily built to be super competitive. Like, they're optimized for, what the character's cards have to offer. But these are not meant to be competitive. These are meant to be played in, like, waifu formats or, casual locals kind of things. So that's kind of the baseline that we're dealing with. That being said, Brandon, you built Shizu from Slime. What does it look like?
So, level 0 is more or less trying to just get into the next stages, really kind of trying to play into the memory thing a little bit, because Shizu from Slime looking at sending cards to memory, compressing, and then burning pretty considerably. So one of the key cards from level 0, looking at that user of Ifrit Shizu, to be able to power up cards and then pay 1 encore to stay alive, and then going to memory in that following turn. So be able to shove cards in memory that way. Hitting level 1, you're looking at that Conqueror of Flames Shizu, that staple from set 1, on pants to be able to, again, when it becomes reversed, reveal the top card. If it's not a climax, go to memory. It does run the anti-magic mask from set 2, because it does have Shizu in character on the mask itself. Another card that goes to memory. Just kind of try to compress as much as possible through that way. At level 2, I actually do run the red 2-1 Shizu, a climax combo as well, that allows me to be able to, on reverse, pay 1 and then basically stuff an opponent's climax into memory. So trying to compress myself and then decompress my opponent. So that way when I get to level 3, with the Shizu resolutely facing off, stack up a bunch of burn 4s pretty immediately, with it being able to then kind of search itself out. So not having to just worry about hand size for that, just being able to get those characters in place, compress as much as possible, decompress my opponent, and then swing big in the end.
One of the things that's really cool about the Shizu cards in the Slime sets is that they all do play with memory so much, right? So the level 1 memory compression engine that we remember from kind of that first Slime set, that first Slime deck that really took off and did well, is not only present here, but it's something that you can really lean into, right? Because a lot of the Shizu cards do that, right? Like you said, the combo does, the event does. So Shizu can pretty consistently compress itself, 8 cards into memory. Feels pretty feasible with this list. And with the 2-1 decompression combo, as much as that's on red, and like obviously, you don't love splashing red into this necessarily, it's got enough utility, and you're also running 4 pants triggers, right? So you can get this back into your hand more easily.
You're running pants triggers, and you're also running book triggers, like for the top end. So like you're going to be drawing cards into hand, and Shizu has climax swap.
It makes a lot of sense as a tech combo, especially in waifu, right? Like that's one of the cool things about the waifu format is it kind of encourages you to just like work with what's there. Level 2 climax removal is expensive and it's a little janky, but it can really punish an opponent, especially if they're already playing something that doesn't compress super well. You just open them right up for massive burns, which, obviously the book top end does. Some consistency pieces with the mask, some onboard power with that level 0 that pumps, also enables the level 2 to get big enough so that it can get those reverses that it needs for its climax removal combo. And of course, it runs 4 copies of the healer, right? Because that's the other thing that Shizu does, is that it heals down pretty consistently. And, having that engine still intact as well, a Shizu that, especially in like a waifu format, is going to be bigger than most of the things it faces, allows you to keep board, keep resources for a combo that isn't expensive, right? As long as you have the memory condition, which should be pretty easy to get, it's just on attack burn 4 you don't have to pay for, and on play, the book trigger can search out another copy of itself. So pretty easy to get the whole board together for the end game and just swing 4-3, 4-3, 4-3.
It's also a very greedy list in a lot of ways, trying to do a lot in a short amount of time, and not having some of those key consistency tools that you would need for a regular slime deck. It's going to be lacking in some ways. I think there's enough consistency pieces here that you're going to be able to put your game plan together most of the time.
And I also think that's one of the things in the waifu format, right? That's one of the hallmarks of the format, is that you're willing to just kind of go big and hope that everything pops off. You play more aggressively, I think, in this kind of format, because you know that your stuff is a little jankier and like the House of Cards is a little more fragile with something like this. So having, this kind of go big or go home approach to a waifu deck, I think just makes a ton of sense. Insofar as the primary object of card games in general is supposed to be fun, the primary object of a waifu deck is strictly, I'm here to have a good time, and I'm here to build something around a character I care about. Like, that's the goal, right? So that kind of approach to deck building, when we talk about waifu decks, I just think that makes a lot of sense.
So that's Shizu, but Colton, you have Saber from Fate, right?
I do. It's pretty well established that Saber is probably my favorite character in all of fiction. And with Heaven's Feel 2, she finally got the necessary top end to make her waifu deck viable. Not like meta viable or whatever, but playable as a waifu deck that can actually beat things, right? And we're actually seeing this top end more even in the mainline Fate stuff, just because it's more or less guaranteed damage in one lane. It's the Oath of the Sword. On attack, pitch 3. If you do, choose a character. That character gets burned 3 twice. If it chooses itself, it's almost guaranteed to stick 3. Right? Because it's on a choice, so it gets a soul itself, so it swings for 3. If that 3 sticks, great. If it doesn't, you're burning for 3 twice. So something is likely going to stick in that lane. That's all well and good. But again, because this is a waifu deck, we kind of want to go big. This tries to set up the Musashi, the Knight's Oath Saber. And that Saber, it's Musashi when it cancels mill 1, burned, that card's level +1. So in a perfect world, we're using the combo to set up the Musashi to hopefully get us 3 burns. And we can add Soul with one of the few cards that isn't Saber. The trigger off Shiro lets us get the climax, and also pumps Soul to the Musashi to make that cancel more likely. So you're basically swinging for, 5 or 6 depending on your lane. And if it cancels, you get the Musashi and you get a pair of burn 3s. So pretty consistent damage in one lane. And if you stick one of your other 2 swings, that should be enough to close. That's kind of how level 3 works. Level 2 uses the same Excalibur climax to do something very similar to the level 2 Shizu. Noble Phantasm Unleashed is a card from 0. On attack, pay 1, pitch 1 to remove an opponent's card from game, put it in memory, and this card gains 1,000 power. So this is a 2-1 that swings in at 10 when we combo, and it uses the same climax to, on attack, so it doesn't need the reverse, remove a climax from our opponent's deck. Hopefully decompressing enough so that it makes the cancel burns all the more dangerous. Because 1, we're swinging for 5 on the initial swing, so if we stick that, okay, it's 5, we feel pretty good about it. And if that doesn't stick, obviously we have the cancel burns. So decent synergy, I think, between the level 2 and the level 3, especially considering that they're on the same climax. Level 1 is really straightforward. It's just a rolling power on reverse Maguro. On reverse, look it up to 4, add a Master or Servant, so adds, more or less anything that is a part of her endgame combo. So good mill on it, and it also gains power when it gets that reverse. So getting the first reverse is really important, which is why we run the Moment of Peace Saber promo that grants 1500 to something when we rest it. So this Saber combo is swinging in at 8 if we can rest that, which I feel should get us the reverse more often than not. So if we can swing there with 8, and then we can grant power something else, that pushes that lane to 8-5, pushes the next lane to 8-5. So this will consistently swing in the 8s as long as we have the board, which will allow us to get the reverses that we need. It's on shot, which I don't necessarily love, but it's flavorful. You know, just more cancel burn. Saber is, you know, obviously an aggressive character. The deck is very aggressive, very, you know, big swing, damage heavy. You know, that's what it's going for. So it's fun. The other interesting card at level 1 is the Mischievous Smile Tiger. That's the other non-Saber that we run, so we have, you know, only 4 that are non-Saber. We run 2 of this. It's not a Master of Servant, so it's not targetable, but it sends an opponent's climax, essentially, when it gets played from our opponent's waiting room to their stock. So it can potentially bury an opponent's climax in stock while we refresh, which is fun. Hopefully decompressing our opponent just a little bit more as we push them into final deck. So we can really, with this and the combo, hopefully pull 2 climaxes out of their deck and really decompress them. And level 0 is really just a hodgepodge of a bunch of different Saber Zeros that all kind of do the same thing. They all either have power or grant power. So that's basically what 0 does. I have 10 different profiles in this, and 7 of them are one-ofs that just, most of them grant some kind of power either to itself or to something else. This is the most waifu-y part of this deck, for sure, because it's just a bunch of different really good card art, because Saber has so much good art, and it's fun to have it all sleeved up and in the same deck. So most of it's just that. We also run 3 copies of the Brainstorm, because this deck desperately needs some mill, and the Brainstorm's actually decent, because on Climax play we can add power to something. 2 things, actually, 500 power each, which is pretty cool, so that helps us get the level 1 reverses. We also run the Style of the Night, which grants hexproof to our center lane, so we can't get money countered when we're trying to do our big burns with, hopefully, the Musashi. And, you know, obviously the Drop Searcher, because search is pretty necessary in a list that has more or less, you know, limited options for that sort of thing. So, but that's kind of like how the deck works. It's got decent synergy. Unfortunately, Fate has 5 sets, so there's enough Saber in those sets to kind of put together all of the interesting pieces and make something that works. I like how this plays. It's inconsistent for sure, because there's like no way to get your climaxes, not really. So you have to draw into them, which sucks, except for the top end with the Shiro. But there's enough synergy. You can search stuff out with enough pieces, and, you know, the level 1 combo, as much as it's on reverse, it gets big enough to get enough reverses. Like, this is pretty deniable in a lot of ways. Like, you can definitely deny this resources by denying the level 1 reverses and, you know, all that. But in a normal game against a deck that isn't like standby or heavy meta, this is pretty solid. It's decent. For a waifu deck, I feel pretty good about it. And it's also, you know, got a bunch of different profiles, and it's just fun to play.
No, absolutely. And I think the ability to be able to include a lot of different profiles with the character art, especially at 0, where you have so many of them, because that's what you want, right? You want to be able to play the character that you enjoy and have the card art that you enjoy all in the same deck. So, no, I think it makes sense.
So yeah, that is it for today, because again, there was no news. And realistically, we have a couple other topics kind of in this vein in our back pockets to talk about, because there may be more stretches of no news as we, you know, wait for Springfest announcements. But hopefully you liked this. If you did, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have a waifu deck that you really like, put it in the comments. We've got links to these decks in the description if you're interested. On Thursday, we will have 5 cards, 5 minutes for Bang Dream, Uncommons and Commons. Next Tuesday, the world debut of Weiss 101. And then the following Thursday, we will have gameplay, probably just of these 2 decks. So if you want to see these 2 decks in action, we'll have gameplay for that a week from Thursday. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and have a good one.
We'll see you then.